Are any of you professional game designers, authors, artists? Couple? Yeah. Hey, professional can also be trying to be professional. If anybody's ever paid you for it, then you are professional. No, if you've ever been paid for it, so doesn't have to be a regular gig. You know. Funny little story. You guys may have heard that freelancers, particularly in tabletop games, it's always catch as catch can about whether they actually get paid for their work. Weirdly enough, in my career, I am actually plus $1,000 in that. No, plus $1,600 in that, because I had 3 projects where I got paid advances for that were then canceled, which means I didn't have to finish the work. So that's kind of like, extraordinary in the industry. I haven't had anything I haven't gotten paid for that whatever. Oh, I had done work on all of them, but I had not done so much that I begrudged just taking the advance and walking away. I mean, I was always disappointed that, this isn't going to come out, but hey, at least I got something for it. So. And one of them was a novel that I then didn't have to finish. It was actually kind of nice, but a little disappointing. That dragon thing.
Oh, yeah. I had my first 2 accepted novels got canceled before they were published, and I got the kill fee for it, which sucks. I mean, the kill fee's nice, it's cash, but still it's like, that's a poor payment for months and months of work and effort, and, mom getting all excited about my book coming out and all that, so.
It's tough when it's your first 2.
Well. Yes, on the same day.
Oh, geez.
Or killing the entire product line, sorry.
Yeah, I got $1,000 for writing 2 chapters.
Actually, one of them was later, I was able to rewrite it and make it into a Forgotten Realms novel. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, that was a bad day.
One funny thing is I have one of my first real efforts at designing something was when I was about 14, and it was a spell point system for D&D. And in 2000, when we put out 3rd edition Unearthed Arcana, I shamelessly published that. So basically unchained.
Nice.
Where are we at?
Are we on?
Yeah. Okay, we are at 1:30. The pregame is over. If anybody at any time can't hear us or whatever, please raise your hand. But our intention is to go through a fairly short presentation and then do a lot of Q&A. Kevin over here, who's arranged all of this, so thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Has a microphone so that he can walk around, or you guys can come up, or however he wants to do it. Ask questions. But anyway, welcome From Dice to Digital, a look at the professional and personal correlations between working in both industries. Rich Baker, to my left, go to the bio screen, has been a game designer since, 1990?
1991.
1991, and I've been basically the same, maybe like a year early or whatever. You can read our stuff on here. Currently, we both work for ZeniMax Online Studios on Elder Scrolls Online. And I came from a background in tabletop at West End Games, working on Star Wars Torg, all their stuff you can all read. And then worked at TSR and Wizards, a company called Red 5 Studios that kind of came out with a game called Firefall, and then Digital THQ working on Warhammer 40K as the lead writer, and then been spending the last 14 years at ZeniMax.
I'm Rich Baker. I started at TSR Incorporated in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin in 1991. I had a chance to work on Dungeons and Dragons in the second, third, fourth, and fifth editions. I was there in 1997 when Wizards bought out TSR and moved everyone out to Seattle. So I went out to Seattle and spent a good long time at Wizards of the Coast, all the way up till the end of 2011. Then came the day when Wizards of the Coast decided they could no longer afford to retain my services, which unfortunately is a hazard in this line of work. But I started up a little tabletop game company of my own for a bit. We published a couple of cool things through Kickstarter. And then in 2020, former colleague, a current colleague of ours and a longtime industry veteran, Bill Slavicsek, basically called me up and said, "Hey, Rich, I could use another writer for Elder Scrolls Online. What do you say?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure. I'm actually, kind of comfortable out here." But then I got to thinking about it and decided, Bill wouldn't ask if he didn't really actually want the help. So I, in 2020, drove across the country in February of 2020 from Seattle to, northern Maryland, which was a really weird time to move across the country. Let me tell you, it was like a Stephen King novel. And I've been at Elder Scrolls, ZeniMax, working on Elder Scrolls Online basically since.
Rich had the distinct pleasure of coming into the office, getting a desk, doing all the stuff, and then what was it, 1 week later or 2 weeks?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. They
2
sent
weeks
us
they
home.
sent us home. So we've all been working mostly remote, though there's some hybrid ever since. But that's not really what we're going to talk about. Both Rich and I have not only worked in tabletop and then computer games, but we've also done both. We've crossed back and forth. And I first started running this seminar years ago when I and another former tabletop designer, David Williams, who designed the L5R card game and a bunch of other stuff, used to do it at PAX. And then I took it over or whatever. Bill Slavicsek, who Rich was talking to, was originally going to be our third panelist, but he is under VO deadline hell right now, which is one of those things that we can sort of talk about. But anyway, let's jump right into enough about us. So topics of this seminar, we're going to talk about, as you can see, similarities and differences between designing, writing, other disciplines for both these two mediums. Some of the things that we find common or overlapping between them, and then some hopefully essential takeaways for those of you who are interested in pursuing one or both. One thing I would recommend is, especially if you want to be like a freelancer or a contractor or something, is leave yourself open to both, because there's opportunities to make money on one while another one is going slow and vice versa. You will find there is a lot of translation. Okay, similarities and differences. I promise I will let Rich talk as well. I'm going to start with one of the similarities in that if you're doing your job right, you are a game designer. That's what we're talking about. Rich is a writer, but he's a writer-designer. I am he's only, but I come from a design background, but I'm also a writer. We want to help the players, whether they be tabletop players or video game players, create a story. To some extent, there is a lot of telling. We're going to create the world, we're going to create characters, things like that. But we believe that, the player's imagination and the player's agency is what's going to create a memorable story. Rich was just talking about his experiences playing Baldur's Gate. I'm sure many of you have played that, and how different it can be depending on the choices you make. And that's a computer game.
Similarities. One of the ones, obviously, because I am very writer focused, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm interviewing people, is what makes a great villain? Right, that's an example of a kind of question or an approach or a consideration you would have in writing that would apply both to a tabletop scenario and also like a quest in a video game, right? How, if once you have a great villain, the follow-up question I like to ask people is, now how do you introduce that villain to the player, right? It's really easy when you create a quest or create or write an adventure for D&D, you put the big boss monster in the back room of the dungeon, and the players never really have any idea who they're fighting until they kick open the last door. All right, and I find that it's better to let the players anticipate that guy, build them up, have a reason to hate him by the time they get there.
I was going to say, if the game design is poor, then that's
Right, exactly. We try not to do that. So that's one of the things that, if you can think about designing a great villain, about designing what sorts of narrative considerations you would have for when that villain makes his appearance, how do you foreshadow that villain? That's a skill set that would work both in tabletop and in the video game environment.
Yeah, and
Example of a similarity.
yeah, and again, another thing you have to remember is that you, as a designer, an artist, an engineer, whatever your contribution is, writer, editor, you are creating a game. If you want to be a novelist, go be a novelist. That's great. I've done that. Write short stories.
Also a novelist.
Write comic books, things like that. It's terrific. That's where you get to tell your story, and certainly the readers will interpret it how they will, and you can have lots of metaphor and all that. But we're trying to create a game. We want to have choices, challenges. If I can tell a story through the gameplay, then I've succeeded, because that means the player. I used to do a presentation on telling story in video games, and the idea was you got to tell it, you got to show it, and you got to experience it. You don't just say the big boss is the toughest vampire around. You show that they're the toughest vampire around, and then you have the players experience that. Maybe the vampire boss kicks their butt the first time they meet them. Maybe they see them kicking somebody else's butt and they try and help, but they can't save them. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's terrible. And as Rich said, now I want to get this guy even more. Or this woman. Either it's vampire, whatever. So those are a couple of similarities that you really want to delve into. You also want to keep up the pacing. I used to teach creative writing, and I taught basically all forms of creative writing. And who here thinks that the novel is kind of the pinnacle of creative fiction writing? I'm sticking with paper right now. Short story. Okay. Poetry. Okay. Those are the three that I'm going to cover right now. I mean, you may have been waiting for something else. Like, wait, what about spoken word song? I don't. But no. The reason I bring this up is
Interpretive dance.
In a novel, the reader has invested in the idea that I've got 300, 500, 250 pages here, and there's going to be a cohesive story all the way through, and I'm going to read about the characters and everything. I'm going to go. And that means you can spend a couple of pages talking about the trees. Hello, Tolkien. You can talk about the cool armaments on the spaceship. Hello, David Weber. You can talk about the roiling seas and the way the ship groans in Melville and all this. You can do all this stuff, and it can be really engaging and interesting, because the reader has faith that you're going to get back to the point at some point, and this is all going to add to it. The short story, and by short story I don't mean novella, I mean 30 pages, under 15,000 words, something like that. You got to kind of get to the point. You got to make your characterizations sharp. You want to introduce that character, and you want everybody to know about that character in a paragraph or two, because we got to get to the action. We can describe a meal, but it's got to be short. You can describe the seas, old man at sea, all that sort of stuff. Poetry, every word not only has to serve a purpose, but it has to serve multiple purposes. I want to convey meaning. I want to convey mood. I want to convey, any sort of emotion that I want to have in there, and I should pick my words very carefully. I mean, yes, you can write the Iliad, which is an incredibly long poem. Most poems we think of as fairly short, or more songs, and so you don't want to waste anything. Game design can be like poetry. You want every encounter to serve a purpose. Rich, tell me what you were telling your writers the other day.
Oh, one of the things that I sometimes will get on myself for also is when you realize that you've started a conversation, a dialogue scene, and you don't know what it is you're trying to convey. Right? What is you have to stop and ask yourself, what is the point of this conversation? What am I what am I trying to get the player to know by the time we finish going, space bar, space bar, space bar, or whatever, or advancing through the conversation, so that I have conveyed the thing that this, the player needs to know out of this conversation. When we get somebody kind of rabbit holing down into, why this guy is a bad guy and all this awful stuff he did. Okay, first line or two, that's probably good, but tell me then how that's relevant to beating him at the end. Tell me again how it's relevant to the important information I'm going to need to have to deal with this guy later on.
Heck, or where I need to go next.
Yes. What am I supposed to be doing? Why am I hunting the rats? Whatever it is, there should be an answer to that. And if you've written a conversation and you get to the end of the conversation, you realize I talked about everything except what the player is supposed to be doing. That wasn't actually that wasn't a good use of our resources. That wasn't a good use of the player's time.
And that gets, again, into the just enough but not too much detail. When I became the creative director for 3rd edition D&D, heck, during 2nd edition a lot, and Rich knows about this because he worked a lot on Forgotten Realms. I don't know how many of you remember reading a tabletop adventure and you have these read aloud sections. Usually they were in a gray box, and it would be like read aloud or paraphrase. And some of the Forgotten Realms ones, I'm sorry to pick on Forgotten Realms, but would have paragraphs.
I would say 2nd edition D&D in general.
2nd edition.
It wasn't just that far.
And I got really annoyed by that because it's about a game. I want to play this game. And I told the writers for the 3rd edition Adventure Path and most of the other things is, if you can't say that read aloud section in one breath, it's too long. Because I don't want the players sitting there going, when did I just hit him?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
That guy didn't say all that stuff. I shot him with my crossbow.
Yeah.
He said hello, and that's when I shot him.
And
all the rest of the stuff doesn't matter.
Now, does that mean that you don't want to have story in these games? No, of course not. But you want to rely on those different ways of conveyance. If you want to have the guy do the snidely mustache twirl, or the gloating or something like that, you have him do that quick, but then you also use it. You use a visual, you use a gameplay. Remember, I encourage people. I talk about visuals, and everybody can picture in a computer game. There are all these visuals, but you can have visuals in tabletop too. I always love those modules where we would get an artist and we'd say, hey, this is what this object looks like. This is what this room looks like, and they would draw it, and then you get to that, and instead of having a read aloud describing this area, you would say, show the players figure 27, and you'd be like, oh look, this is what you see, and then you could say, oh yeah, that's an altar, and that's a magical effect, something like that. Computer games, we have a lot more liberty, but computer games can get lazy too. Cutscenes. Who likes cutscenes? It's okay to say you like cutscenes. I do not particularly, unless they're really well timed. One of my friends, or actually several of our friends, have worked on a couple of games that I'm not going to mention which ones they are, that are actually award-winning games, that are really great games that I like. But one of the games had a thing where you couldn't save until you got to a save area, which is fine. I think that applies a little bit of tension. That's kind of cool. But it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just wanted to get to the save area. I have to fight things, and the fights weren't super challenging, but I just had to get there. I'm like, oh my God, I just want to get there so I can save the game and go to sleep. And I go into the town, I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to be going. And a cutscene starts. And it lasted 10 minutes. I timed it. I was like, oh my God. And I knew if I quit this cutscene, I was going to have to go back to my last save point and do that all over again. So I had to sit there and pound my head on the thing to try to keep myself awake. And I mean, don't get me wrong, this game was gorgeous. I still love it. But that's one of those things where you don't do that. What I would do if I were going to do a cutscene, I'd do a thing where make it very clear that, hey, you have accomplished X goal. You have reached the save point. You have done whatever it is you need to do. Here's a cutscene. Watch it or not. In Elder Scrolls Online, how many of you play Elder Scrolls Online? Oh, wow.
Oh, okay,
Great.
awesome. Thank you. We really appreciate you guys.
You may have noticed that when we do theater scenes, we don't do cutscenes except like at the very opening and things, because it's an MMO and we don't want to hang people up. Usually when we do what we call a theater scene, that is NPCs moving around, talking, and doing all kinds of good stuff, we do it after you've accomplished whatever your thing is. So if two characters want to get into an argument, one of them smacks the other, knocks them unconscious, does whatever, something that the player is not participating in, we like to do that after the player has filled the thing. Because then we say, if the player isn't interested, they can run away. they can go keep up with the adventure. They got the important information, as Rich conveyed. There's this cool action they might miss, but that's up to them. That's kind of perfect.
We should move it along a little bit. We're actually getting bogged down on the
Yeah,
first slide.
I'm sorry. All right. Well, the final thing is, again, let the players do it.
Sure. It's really easy. One of the tricky parts in just the challenge of being writing for a game in general is I've described that when you're writing for like an adventure, or a quest, I don't know who the heroes are, and I don't know what choices they're going to make. Right, which is an insane form of writing when you think about that. If I'm going to sit down and write a novel, I know who I'm writing about, and I know if he's going to kill the dragon, or pay a bribe, or get on a boat and sail away and leave the world behind. I can make that choice. When I'm creating a scenario, whether that scenario is a tabletop adventure or it is a quest for a game like Elder Scrolls Online, I don't know which of those choices the player is likely to make.
At least you hope you don't. You
Right.
want the player at least to have some amount of choice, or the magician's choice, that is the illusion of choice, that at least feels good.
Yeah. But the trick is, because I don't know about the players, the thing I do know about is I know about the NPCs. All right, I know who else is around that adventure that we sprinkle into that adventure for you to interact with. So one of our shortcuts, one of our little cheats is a lot of the characterization in a story that would normally be sitting on the protagonist, right, the hero of the tale. We kind of hide a lot of that characterization and development and interaction on the NPCs. But even then, I don't know that you're going to always want to talk to the NPCs. So that's a bit of a challenge there, and that's why when we say let the players be the heroes, let's remember that even if we have the most awesome, great NPC around who's a world-class bad guy beater, if for your Elder Scrolls Online people, maybe somebody like Lyris Titanborn, right? A great character, big strapping Nord gal who hits things with an axe and kills a lot of stuff. But we can't make Lyris the star of the story. It's got to be the player. Lyris has got to be there to make the player feel special. It can't be about the player making Lyris feel special.
But then, of course, we don't want those other characters to be, useless or boring either. How many of you played the Elder Scrolls Western Skyrim? One with Solstice River. That was a few years ago. Well, we had basically the story, and sorry if it's a little spoilery, is the bad guy is this vampire who's trying to take over Western Skyrim, and the main character is a woman, a princess named Svanna. And Svanna is very much like Hamlet in a lot of ways. I based her on Hamlet. I was writing her up. And so she starts out very, or actually it's kind of a cross between Hamlet and Prince Hal before he becomes Henry V. And just the idea that she starts out as kind of a wastrel, but sort of learns, responsibility, and the player is integral into that. She's one of many characters. Lyris is also in that story. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that she had an important role in the story, but again, didn't detract from players. So in the final boss fight, when you're fighting the big bad, Svanna has progressed to the point where she has an ability that she can basically use to kind of weaken opponents. So what we do is in the boss fight, Svanna is kind of hanging around the edges, defending herself from some minor things, and then every once in a while, you get what we call a synergy, where you can press a button, and Svanna will then throw this potion that hits the bad guy and sort of weakens them momentarily. So even though she's helping, she only helps when the player tells her to, but it is meaningful help, and you actually helped her become able to do that. So here's a place where I'm really helping her become, the next Lord of Western Skyrim. So she's kind of heroic in that, but I'm, I'm the Ulfric. If you read the Cornwall novels, the Northland stuff, who's basically the power behind the throne. All right.
Yep. Let's press on.
So now here's some differences. First one, guided experience versus fully scripted. Rich, you want to?
Sure. The challenge that we have in video game development in general is that we don't have the medium of a human being who is interpreting the story and presenting it to the players. Right? It is absolutely only what we can anticipate and put into the scripting for the adventure, the quest. Which means that when we come up with a really wacky solution, like I'm going to expect you to go into the cellar and kill rats to save my cheese or whatever it is you're going to do, in a tabletop game, in a tabletop game, right? The players might say, I don't want to fight in the cellar. I'm going to go gather up a whole bunch of firewood. We're going to throw the firewood down there, toss a torch in there. We're going to smoke them out. We're going to make the rats come to us. A perfectly logical thing to do right in a tabletop. The DM could take a moment and say, well, it wasn't written that way, but you know what? I can just put the fight out on the street. It'll work fine. The rats will come out of the smoke. Yeah, it'll be okay. I can reward the players for being a little bit ingenious about that. Yeah, we can't do that in a video game.
Or I can throw some drunk on the second floor who's now caught up in the fire, and you got to go rescue them.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can only give so many options in computer game. Even a sandbox computer game, or like one of these survival ones where you can theoretically go anywhere and do anything. It's like, well, no, you can't. I can't go over here and build a boat unless you designed that for me. So yeah, that's one of the big differences we have to deal with. So in tabletop, one of the ways we deal with that is we try to give the DM or the GM a narrative they can follow, but we also try and give them a few instances of, and here's some things that we anticipate the player might do that you might need to adapt. And here's like, for example, I just wrote an adventure where it's variable about what level the players will be. So I wrote in an option. It's like, oh, if your players are high level or they're just dealing with everything, here's something you can throw at them. If they're having trouble, here's an NPC who can help them. Things like that. You can technically do that sort of stuff in a computer game. We do that all the time, where it's like, oh, if the players are getting pounded on too much, somebody comes in and hits them with a heal spell. But we have to script that in there. There's no infinite versus finite. That is kind of what Rich is talking about there. The infinite, again, with a guided experience with a living game master. Theoretically, you could say, go grab the monster manual, put whatever you want in here. Go redesign the room. We're doing a tournament adventure where I'm flat out telling the DMs, hey, here's the tournament I've provided. Vary it any way you want. Just make sure you hit these points. They have to get this at the end, to move on. But, if you don't like hippogriffs, work in manticores. I don't care. Go for it. Again, computer game, not so much.
Yeah. I actually had a point I was about to make just in that. It blew it out of my head. You
do you want to
flustered me.
take analog versus digital then?
Actually, I'm not exactly.
Okay. All right. I'll go off and then you can.
Yeah. Why don't you keep
All right,
going,
so
and I'll
analog versus digital. Here's one of those places where if you use it correctly, I think the computer games come out ahead. You can have, I was talking about using props or whatever, or using a booklet, whatever. In a computer environment, you can use digital stuff to enhance almost all aspects of the game. Like you could have music. We have a wonderful sound department that does stuff. Right now, one of the things we're doing for our latest thing is I've had to tell the designers how to design stingers. Anybody know what a stinger is? Okay, all right. So basically, easiest analogy, whenever Captain Kirk was about to get into a fight, that sort of thing is, mood music, but there's also sort of a stinger. It's like, it's something really quick that draws the player's attention. Goes, oh, wait, something important is happening.
There's a bunch of them in The Princess Bride. You would hear it all the time. Anytime somebody would deliver an important line in the movie The Princess Bride, there would just be that sort of 80s synth music, obviously, but, whatever. It just would land every time.
And of course, it doesn't have to be musical. It doesn't have to be for a fight. You can do stuff to emphasize things, you can use any sort of sound to do that. For a tabletop game, you can do that as a DM, but most of the time the designer, us, is not going to do that for you. We're not going to be packaging, little synth cards or something like that. I mean, people have done things like that. I know a company that did nothing but come out with CDs of various mood music and sound effects, and that's cool. But it's not something we can design in, whereas as a computer game designer, I can request visuals, I can request audio, I can request sound effects. The only thing I really can't do is smell. Well, I smell. There. But I can get all kinds of different effects. Whereas for a tabletop game, I pretty much have to rely on what I can put out on the table for the DM. And then after that, if they want to go get cool terrain, if they want to use sound effects, if they want to use pictures, kind of up to them.
I will say, just visual storytelling, I think, is one of the things that we don't have an ability to do in the medium of a printed,
Real.
not a lot of it. But Ed was mentioning before, I was just talking to him that I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 in the last few weeks. Fun game. But minor spoiler. You get to a point where earthquakes happen. And you know what? On the screen, you get a shake. Characters kind of stagger around a little bit.
You get the haptic.
Yeah, you might get the little kicker in your hand, right? I mean, there's some real sense that, yes, you were in an earthquake. And as somebody, narrating an adventure, off of like a D&D adventure on your tabletop, I could say, hey, fellas, there's an earthquake, but unless somebody is actually shaking my chair, I'm not feeling the earthquake. So there's definitely some things we can do because of the digital medium.
Yeah. So those reasons I'm pointing out these differences is not to slam one medium or the other, but to make people aware that they shouldn't try and rely on something that their medium doesn't do as well, but should also lean into the stuff it does well. Give the DM options and suggestions for variants. Fully script your stuff in a computer game so that it takes into account stuff that makes the player feel like they have choice. I mean, one of the things we used to do with D&D adventures a lot is people would want to design all these really great dungeons and draw these maps. If you ever think of a dungeon design, you should always think about it as a flow chart, because that's really what it is. And one of the things I used to do is I'd like circle areas and I'd say, if I go left here, then I skip like 6 encounters you design. That's like normally a third of an adventure. That's not good. So what we need to do is we need to have a way to either reduce that, or even better, wrap us back around. Make it not so much a choice of which one of these things do I do, but which one do I do first, and how does it affect things? We used to do a thing that was pretty cool. It's like you went into wing A, then you got, I don't know, the Sword of Dragon Slayer. And in wing B, there was a dragon. But if you went and fought the dragon first, you got the potion of invulnerability that allowed you to get past the really nice, nasty trap in wing A. Similarly, make it feel like the choice mattered.
I will say one other thing, just kind of along that line, is there's a lot less risk entailed in writing a page or two of an adventure, for a printed adventure for like D&D, that the players wind up never actually exploring, right? Because that's one designer, that's maybe one map you drew, right? It's, in terms of pure dollars and cents, you could put a price on that and say it's a few $100 worth of effort. Maybe a couple thousand if it's a big section and you drew a nice map for it. If we were to actually create material, a lot of times in a digital quest, that we actually didn't get to, man, that could be months of effort that was just not wise on our part. So we got to make sure that everything, or we do stuff that gets seen and played.
One of the first adventures I designed for Elder Scrolls Online was an area called Still Rise Village, where it turns out all the people were living skeletons. And you made a choice very early on in the adventure that directed how the adventure would go. And I realized that I had basically designed 2 parallel adventures. And so by the time we realized it was too late to go back, but it's exactly the sort of thing. Unless a player goes back and plays the adventure with another character, there's like 20, 30 minutes of gameplay, which took, of course, several days for various people to put in the game, that people won't even see. It's like, oops. That's one of the reasons why we try to put our choices closer to the end or weave them back and forth around. Final thing on this slide, preparation versus ready to play. This is kind of both design and gaming. It might seem more like design. If you are going to game master, or even if you're going to play a tabletop game, whether it's an RPG or a board game or something like that, preparation usually is a significant part of your time. You know, even if you're reading an adventure that you didn't have to write, you still got to read the adventure, you got to cut the maps, you've got to get miniatures in it. And then computer game, you mostly just fire it up, download the latest patch, which you don't at least physically have to do, but you have to wait from your fingers forever. But then you're ready to go. And when you come home from work, that game is ready for you to pick it up again. You come home from work, even if you were like in the middle of an adventure, you don't leave it out. Because unlike me, you don't have cats that will come steal your miniatures and run away with them. Happens all the time. You see it. He knows. You still have some getting up to speed sort of things that you've got to do. So sort of that would seem like, oh, advantage computer games a lot of ways. But preparation the other way is, I can design. Like, if somebody said to me, hey, after the seminar, you got to run a 4-hour D&D game. Anybody got dice? I can do it. I can do it. I can guarantee it's something that I haven't run before either. So prep work, maybe not as much. Whereas a computer game, it's like, oh, you want me to design 15 minutes of gameplay in Elder Scrolls Online? Okay, give me a couple days and I'll have a draft for you. And it's not going to have any bells and whistles. It's going to be red boxes. There's going to be, you know, NPCs in their jockey shorts. The monsters are all going to be the same, but are going to have different names. You know, so the prep work there is different. So it's front end versus back end.
Press on.
Almost done. What time is it?
It is a little bit after 2. Yeah, 2.
We've got till 2:30?
Yep.
Okay, good. I want to make sure we do that. Okay, and then finally, well, this is kind of our one of our last slides. Overlapping learning. Starts with storytelling. So start
Sure.
with
The one of the fellows who hired me into ZeniMax, and besides Bill, our longtime content lead, used to say that what he wanted most of all in a new content designer was somebody who can tell a story. That you can teach people how to use the tools. You know, now some people are more adept at it than others, or just sometimes take some experience to, you know, really kind of wrap your head around how to make things, you know, sing. But by and large, the commonality, the common leaning is, let's talk about how do we present a story that a player can engage with, be excited by, be challenged by, and then provide a resolution that the player is going to be happy with. The player is going to be glad they spent that time, or feel a little pathos with it. It's like, I'm really bummed out that character guy, you know, that NPC I was escorting didn't make it, but I feel like I participated in this story, and that's something that is equally true, both in whether you're writing a good D&D adventure or if you're writing a good quest for, you know, for a computer
kind of
game.
like, why do I care?
Yeah.
And again, I'm coming back to something I said in an earlier slide with storytelling. Show them elements of the story, tell them elements of the story, and let them experience it. And by the way, don't use those as either or. Use them as always on. You know, always show, tell, and experience. That maybe that didn't make a lot of sense, but players, any player, whether you're playing a tabletop game or a computer game, there are times when they're going to kind of tune out, or they're focusing on something else, or they're looking at the character sheet. So if you just tell them, hey, the vampire is evil, they might not have heard you, you know. But if you show them the vampire being evil and tell them, well, now you got two ways of getting to it. And then if they experience it, like the vampire attacks them or kills somebody they love or something like that, then they've experienced it. You know, you get all those aspects. It's kind of like when I was teaching people, I always felt if I wanted to get the message across, I had to give the message 3 times and hopefully in 3 different ways. Not because the students are slow, it's because not everybody learns the same way. Same thing, not everybody enjoys the same amount of stuff in the game. Some people are all about the fighty fight, and if you want them to engage with the story has to have the fighty fight. Some people are interested in being the thespians, the role players. Give them that opportunity. Let them do that, and they engage with the story and they become available. Like Rich's character in my game has now just started building a fortress because he's interested in that. I'm like, you want to build a fortress? Awesome. We'll figure out a way for that to work. Because you're engaged.
I was just going to say, just out of curiosity, how many of you ever tap the space bar to skip dialogue? Yeah, you're monsters. Us, us writers are crying whenever you do that, but that's fine. But that's one of the things that kind of just reinforces the idea that we have to kind of show things in a couple different mediums, right? We have to make sure that it's, you might not read that conversation, you might not glean that important nugget of information out of that conversation, which is why we want to make sure we're kind of using a 360-degree approach, right? The full court press approach, right? We're also showing you as you're moving through the environment, the
devastation pause.
Yeah, there's a mood being portrayed by the fact, oh, this farmhouse looks really creepy. There's a couple of old corpses lying in the yard. So the player might not have remembered that. Yeah, the guy, back in the town said, now be careful of the plague that's out there. But at least we know that they saw it when they got there, right? So that's one of the things that not only do you just, put it in the dialogue, you also show it. You also tell it a couple times. You also let the player experience it. Like make a saving throw. That's experiencing it.
The next bullet point, we'll pick up the pace a little bit today.
Yep.
But most background work. You've probably heard this, that in order to write, a 100,000 word novel, you write 250,000 words and you throw a bunch away. Same thing with adventure design. But also a lot of that stuff you even put forth. You don't you write an adventure for the DM, but then you make it clear to the DM they don't have to convey all that information to the players. They don't have to sit there and read the whole thing. The players may not even know all the stuff. They skipped over an area that has really cool traps. Like, okay, fine, use it somewhere else. Same thing in computer games. We have to do a lot of back-end work just to get everything to go. And sometimes it doesn't matter. I mean, one of our creative directors, Rich Lambert, is notorious for having overpowered characters because he's really good at the game. So when we have him test one of our things, he just mows through the mobs. But he recognizes that, oh, I'm a really, really good player. So I'm killing these things in 2 seconds. It's going to take somebody else longer. If it took me less than 2 seconds, then I know there's a problem. But I'm not your balance best guy. We've got QA guys who can do that. So he's looking for the pacer. The final thing, I touched on this, invest in the players and imagination. Anything you can do to suggest to people that something is cool, something is interesting, is even better than what you can portray. I mean, I'm sure that all of you have seen movies or read books that have just opened up your imagination and something became scarier or funnier or more exciting because you could relate to it. Maybe going down into the dark basement, if the director, the writer, whatever has done a good job, it's evoking to you that time you were scared in the dark place. If you're sitting there looking at a horror movie and you're laughing at it because people are acting stupid, that's probably not doing what the person wanted you to do. But if you can latch into the imagination, you make the characters empathetic, you make the situation relatable, even if it's a situation with dragons and flying skyscrapers, there's got to be something that you can relate. But so you have to link in and make sure player empathizes, because then they'll fill in the blanks.
A great example of this is, you notice a good horror movie doesn't actually show you the monster until pretty late, because you get kind of invested in imagining what that monster must be and what is going on, right? It's scarier that most movies in a lot of ways become less scary when you finally get a look at the thing.
Some of the old black and white horror movies were really more like suspense, and you'd be like, oh my God, and you realize, I never saw the monster, I only saw a shadow. Okay, essential takeaways. It's all about the work. If you don't love what you're doing, I mean, we all do our work for a paycheck, I hope, but you've also got to engage with the material. You've got to be inspired. You've got to do the work. You've got to be willing to lay down that structure so that you can build on it.
I would say, kind of speaking to the second bullet point a bit, right, that I have known many people, professional game designers, who have done well in both fields. It is amazing how many of the skills do translate. If you're a solid writer, That's going to show up both in adventure design you do for a tabletop and also in dialogue and quests you create for a video game. It's a very similar skill set.
And while both of us are primarily writers and designers, that also goes for other things. If you're an
Artists, yeah.
artist, there's
Yeah.
stuff for you in both mediums. If you like doing cartography, if you like doing editing, even you think like, oh, an animator, how are they going to translate their skills from computer games to tabletop? They totally can. I mean, where do you think miniatures design comes from? People do 3D models. And then finally, we talked a lot about it, but beware of the differences. The idea is make the game fun. Don't make it about you. Make it about the audience. Granted, what you find fun, hopefully other people will find fun. But don't try to be so clever that you outthink your audience and make them unhappy or unsatisfied. All right, sorry we've reached the last couple, but I really wanted to do this Q&A. So.
Yeah.
Please, anybody have?
The gentleman here would like to have that his hand up first.
I'll carry my
I'm like a long-term Elder Scrolls fan. I've been playing since I was in like 6th grade. I played.
We love people like you. Thank you so much.
I played ESO about 2 or 3 years ago, and the community, like, one of the things that they talk about a lot is how much of the story they love seeing in ESO. So I was wondering if you have a favorite DLC you've worked on, like mechanics or story or whatever.
Part of being a professional in this industry is loving the thing you're working on right now the most. That's kind of the really handy skill to develop. So obviously I'm going to tell you the thing I love the most is the thing I've actually was working on just yesterday. But if I were to look
Which
back,
you can't really talk about.
yeah, unfortunately I can't tell you
not
about
yet.
that.
I'll get in trouble.
I loved our Legacy of the Bretons. I got to do a lot of the writing of the quests on High Isle, and I did enjoy that quite a lot.
I had a lot of fun. I was the zone lead for that. I had a lot of fun because I studied Middle English literature, and so we brought a lot of the Arthurian thing in there. I'm kind of similar. I will always, though, have a soft spot for Murkmire. That was the first one I was the zone lead in.
Murkmire's pretty good.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed working on Vardenfell because that's the last zone where one person, me, did the entire zone story. Usually we break them up because it's too much work, but I'm amazing. So no, we just worked under a different schedule and different team structure.
Hi, what are some of your favorite tools for developing, designing, brainstorming, especially when you're trying to present to other people the ideas you've come up with?
Favorite tools. I mean, to be honest, I'm very much a writer first. That's really where my background is. So, I mean, it's the Word document, right? I mean, and making words sing. That's kind of what I do. It's very rare that I even do something like presentation like Ed just gave you here with a PowerPoint. But so as far as like tool set, I could tell you that there are like fancy like narrative, more so than Word for, oh, you want to write a novel, here's this program or that program that are better writing programs. But I've always just made do with Word. Nothing fancy.
I have a funny one. This is kind of dry, but do you guys know what Microsoft Visio is? It's a flowchart creator. I think of adventures, whether they're quests for ESO or quests for a tabletop game, I think of them as flowcharts. This happens, and then what are my options after that? And one of the reasons I like doing that is as a zone lead, I have to work with a variety of different disciplines. I have writers who not only will write, but will read long paragraphs of things. But then I have other people like, the animators or world designers or something who don't want to read a 70-plus word document. So if I can break stuff down into things like bullet points or Visio flowcharts, they can see, oh yeah, all right, so we go down to the plains and then we have the choice of either going to the caves or up into the mountains, and okay, I get it, So I like doing that, and it can translate into PowerPoint. My biggest thing when I'm working with a team is I prefer one-on-one collaboration or one-on-a-group collaboration followed up by bullet point notes and everything. But Visio is one of my kind of weird presentation things.
Hi. You've said like again and again, like keeping yourself open to like both positions is like really sorry, both
Disciplines,
mediums.
yeah.
Yeah. Is like is possible, is doable. And as like a game design student, that's like so awesome to hear. I was curious if you had any advice for what sort of work or like content you could add to a portfolio that would be applicable to both of those, like really open to both mediums. Does that make sense?
I've seen a lot of people use, and I hope I don't butcher the name of the site, like Twine, like online stories and things. That's actually not a bad thing to stick in your portfolio. That kind of shows that you can create a branching narrative and keep track of where it's going. That would be something I would look at more in the context of hiring for a narrative designer for like a video game. Whereas if I was looking for a writer for a tabletop game, I really just want to see a solid writing sample, right? Show me that you can narrate, present an encounter that's got or present a couple of characters in a scenario that are interesting, are well executed, and show some potential. You know.
For computer game designs, one of the things I would recommend is there are a number of games out there that have basically editors that are free. A lot of people delve into Unreal or some easy ones. I would strongly suggest that you get your own website, and then you have it very well organized so that people can click between them and give people, certainly the portfolio, the resume, all that stuff, but give them little examples of your work. Like you describe a 5-minute level for a game that has an editor. You design a short adventure for tabletop, whatever you can put in it. If you have friends or colleagues who are also interested in that sort of thing and have disciplines that overlap with you, collaborate. Like maybe you've got a friend who's an animator or an artist, they can supply some art for it, and then you can both put it on each other's website and say, oh, I did the art for this adventure that my friend did. And you can be like, oh, I wrote this adventure, but my art friend is the one who did the art. And that will make it more impressive. The more you can make it look like a professional excerpt, the better. And then try to continue to update it. I would say you want to probably try and add something new, every 4 to 6 months if you can. And you want to start thinking about curating it after a year or two and being like, okay, this doesn't really represent my abilities now. And of course, when you do get any sort of professional opportunity, always make sure to confirm with the company that you can use excerpts and put them on your website. Almost all will be fine with that as long as you say, oh, this is property of ZeniMax Online Studios, but here you go. And you can also, if you are working on stuff like that, you can also do short videos and things like that. So if you don't want to have a playable candidate there.
I have a two-part question. The first one is kind of specific and technical. If you're creating a narrative for a video game and it's a narrative video game, what kinds of buckets would you recommend sorting dialogue options into? So like some might affect a major branch in the story, some might affect character disposition, like heuristics and things like that. Are there any kind of standard buckets that you find yourself sorting choices into? And the second part of my question is, what happened to the Dwemer?
We wonder about the Dwemer too, but the buckets we tend to, the big difference that we kind of use all the time is simply, is this a mandatory conversation, a quest advancing conversation? Is this going to make a quest go from one step to the next step, or is this a flavor conversation? Those are the two, that's like the essential divide of the flavor conversation. The player might actually not bother to delve into, so we can't put quest critical information in there because the player might not see it. Whereas if I know you had to go and advance through the conversation, the dialogue, in order to advance the step and go on to find out the next thing you're going to do, at least I know that you had a chance to see it. Other than that, you mentioned like relationship stuff. Our best example of that sort of thing is our companion system in Elder Scrolls Online. If any of you guys are familiar with it, when we do have different actions and activities and even conversations that will kind of add points to the companion tracking system,
or
if you will.
detract. It's basically like how well do they like you?
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, certainly like Starfield or Baldur's Gate or any game like that, you're going to see, yeah.
So
Yeah,
something-
Sarah Morgan didn't like that in Starfield. Yes, I know Sarah Morgan didn't like that. She doesn't like anything I do. But
something I like to do, and we have sort of integrated occasionally when we're designing stuff, but we probably do it less than we should, is what I call keywords. And these are things, especially when you're designing just for yourself, to start, you can come up with keywords that could be a character name, they could be an emotion, they could be tied into the particular story or whatever. And then as you write elements of dialogue or description text, whatever, you put a keyword either in that text or adjacent so that you can always search. It's like, oh, what are all the things I've said about the character Roger? And if you search for Roger, then, oh, look, there's 12 things. And I said Roger has black hair and dark eyes. Okay, well, I want to make sure of that. I said Roger gets angry when people, steal his lunch money, whatever. All these sorts of things, and I can keep track of that. And I can do this by putting it in separate things. But as I'm writing, it's kind of nice to use like the footnote feature or something and just throw in, oh, this is where I'm getting more interesting stuff about Roger. And create a bunch of keywords, have them in a separate thing, so you always know, oh yeah, my keywords are Roger, gunfight, starship, whatever, blue, whatever you think is important. Don't overdo it, but yeah, I hope that helps. And yeah, I would love to talk about the grammar someday.
Can you hear me through the mask fine?
Yeah.
Let's go. Hopefully other people relate to this experience more than just me, but sometimes when you're writing for an RPG, like maybe a campaign, you're halfway through, maybe you're working on a video game, you've already got some content out, maybe you're doing an episodic DLC, something like that. You reach a point where it's not working. You have an NPC, you're like, I don't care about this NPC anymore, the players don't care about this NPC. Obviously, if it's like a novel, you can just blow it up and start over, try something different. But when you already have content out, do you guys have tips or ideas on a clean way to pivot to a new direction for the quest, or maybe another way to reframe it, maybe in how that might differ between the different mediums?
I mean, I think that's kind of one of the things that scares me the most is realizing we told the wrong story. And sometimes that's not very clear. This is actually an example from a different meeting that just astonishes me. The movie Zootopia, Disney, Zootopia, actually is a fantastic movie. Here's the thing. Until about a year from its release, the star of the movie was the fox. And somebody at Disney, and somebody high up at Disney had the moral courage and fiber after they're, $300 or $400 million down the pipeline, and this movie's coming out next summer, to say, you know what, guys? This movie needs to be about the bunny. The bunny is the protagonist. Holy cow. I cannot imagine the courage it took to make that, to change that, to pull that lever and change that track. Now, as it turns out, when they really got into it, they discovered that they actually had about 80% of what they needed already. It was just a matter of how they arranged the scenes. They could rearrange the scenes and cover a lot of what they needed to happen, because the conversations are still the same. But even so, they went and did a lot of work late on that in order to really pull that movie off. So I would say it's never too late to realize, hey, we're telling the wrong story. And you hope you're in a situation where you can make a move like Disney did and say, stop, guys, we gotta pivot.
So sometimes,
and say what you can.
Sometimes watch a really good YouTube video on the restructuring of Emperor's New Groove. It was a totally different story. Okay, I want to say one thing on that. I would say also, in a lot of ways, rip the Band-Aid off. Figure out a way to fix it and move on. I don't know how many of you watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but in season 4 with the Initiative was supposed to be part of the backstory. The major story was supposed to be the werewolves. And midway through, Seth Green was like, hey, I'm going off to do movies and stuff. So they had to, write him out of the show. And whether that was good, bad, or indifferent, at some points, you have to do what people have unfortunately called, kill your children. Sometimes you look at something, you go, man, I really liked this at one point, but it's not working. Figure out the cleanest way you can just move off it and do it. Try and tie things up for people who do like it, but just be like, hey, yeah, we're moving on. I think we got time for like one more question.
Yeah, we have time for one more, and then you guys will still be here, so we'll
Yeah, we
take
can
more
go
questions
outside.
outside.
Yeah.
How is the landscape for opportunities different between tabletop and digital? I know in tabletop, there's a lot of opportunities for very small freelance contracts and then very few in-house positions. How is that different in digital?
I would say a successful tabletop company might have 10 design positions, and there's only a handful of companies, like 4 or 5 of them, that even have staffs that large. So yeah, it's hard to get into the tabletop and actually be on staff at a big company. There just aren't that many of those seats open.
Well, it's not that easy. Your games.
But at least in the computer game studio, a lot of times you're going to have a team that might be 40 or 50 people, and there's 20 or 30 or 40 companies that are big enough to command staffs like that, maybe more. So just in terms of headcount, yeah, your odds are probably better at catching on these days in a computer game studio, just because they're bigger.
Well, one of the things I would say, and this goes back to your asking about the portfolio, is do it for yourself. Self-publish, self-create. I mean, I know people who have created their own video games, not terribly complicated, but had a really terrific concept and ended up doing very well. For them, same thing with tabletop. Many of the tabletop companies now that are most successful were started by 1 or 2 people literally in their basement. The landscape right now is tough because the economy is tough, but I would say that you have an opportunity that I didn't have when I started out, in that with the internet, with YouTube, with all this other stuff that's
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding, Kickstarter, and everything, you have the opportunity to self-promote everything. You just got to do it in bite-sized chunks. I've seen a couple of people who are like, oh, I'm going to launch this Kickstarter, I'm going to make $1 million. It's like, some people can. I mean, it really does happen. But a lot of times, most of the ones that do success are people who build up a reputation. They go to the shows, they do the play tests, they do talks like this. They publish stuff that they give away for free. They get their name out there, and then they build it up. Like Kelsey Dion, who did Shadow Dark. A few years ago, nobody knew much about her. Then she started doing freelance work for other companies. She built up a reputation, and then now she's self-published. She's got one of the most successful starters in the industry. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort, and it's going to take a little luck. But I would try not to pin your hopes on getting a full-time position with somebody, but don't leave that off the table. It does happen. We hire people all the time. Do your research before you work for a company. Do they pay their bills on time? Do they hire from QA? I mean, that was one of the things that we always used to have. We would hire people from QA, and one of the things we'd say is hey, if you join our QA, you'll have a real shot at being a designer or an artist or something someday. And we lived up to it. Cinemax is a very good, method for hiring from QA. A lot of other companies, it's dead end, and it doesn't work that way. So, do research, talk to people. Okay, we got to get out of here.